welcome everyone who is tuning in to Channel 15 here in Falmouth. I am Jeff Wyman, the Government Access Coordinator for Falmouth Community Television. We're here today at 310 Dillingham Avenue in our Falmouth Community Television studio. I'm here today with Representative Dylan Fernandes. Dylan,
great to be here, Jeff.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
It's been a few months, so I figured it's a good time to have a nice legislative update from your district.
Yeah.
So, last time you were here, I think, was in May. And we talked about a budget. You introduced the Millennial Caucus. So today we're going to go over a bunch of things. We're going to go over a couple legislative pieces that you've introduced that you've been working on, some healthcare, Millennial Tax stuff. We'll get an update on that caucus, and we'll get into some local issues that you've been working on as well. So let's get right into it. The two bills that you were talking to me earlier before we started the show that you were working on up in the legislature. Let's start with the pesticides.
Yeah, so, first of all, thanks for having me on. It's a thrill to be back, and you guys provide a terrific service to the town. And, we've been really busy this summer looking at kind of the needs of the district. And when I think about the needs of the district, I think a lot about environmental stewardship and about our housing crisis. And so over the past 2 months, I filed two unique pieces of legislation. The first is a pesticide bill, and it's a bill that allows local municipalities, empowers local towns to protect their residents and their environment from harmful pesticides. And actually this week, Jeff, is the 55th anniversary of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, which is, and Rachel Carson, she lived down in Woods Hole, spent time at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. I believe she also worked at MBL as well. So she has a lot of connections to our local community. And she really raised awareness about how pesticides and harmful chemicals were destroying our environment and really harming people in America. And so really timely piece. And so my bill allows local communities to go above and beyond the state standards when it comes to restricting harmful pesticides. And so what does that mean? That means kind of the town of Falmouth would be able to vote to ban glyphosate in town. And we've seen recently a lot of people have reached out to my office about trying to ban glyphosate spraying by Eversource. But also you could go further. You could ban things like neonicotinoids, which is a harmful chemical that's killing our pollinators, like our bees and our butterflies and the like, and our lack of pollinators. And I think a lot of people have heard about this. A lot of people have heard about this massive die-off of bees and how it has horrible effects on our agricultural industry. And so this bill, I think we need kind of a renewed commitment to protecting our people and our environment from toxic chemicals, and this bill aims to do that.
Excellent. It's literally the butterfly effect.
Yeah.
So folks, keep a watch out on that. Is there any information out there that people can follow up on this bill?
Sure. I mean, absolutely reach out to my office if you want to help us advocate for it. Shoot me an email. My email is just my name, Dylan.Fernandes at mahouse.gov. And everything's just kind of online for my contact information. And so people should reach out to my office if they want to help advocate for it.
Absolutely.
And we worked very closely with, local groups, local environmental advocacy groups, and also the Sierra Club and others to put forward this kind of new policy. So we're really excited about it, and we're looking forward to fighting for it.
Excellent. And there's a second piece of legislation that we were talking about too, and it has to do with people who are looking to buy a home for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a unique situation in our district in particular, where we have some of the highest home prices in the entire state. And, I'm the state representative for Falmouth, Martha's Vineyard, and Nantucket. I rent in the district I represent because I can't afford to own a home here. It's just kind of crazy how exorbitant the prices have become. On Nantucket, which I represent, the average home cost is over $2 million.
That's unbelievable.
Right. That's the average, is over $2 million. It's we're at a point in our communities that is just unsustainable. And a lot of the people who grew up here, like I did, who love it here, are having a really hard time buying a home. And one of the hardest pieces with buying a home is putting down that initial down payment, because especially on a $300,000 home, which that's kind of a starter home in the district, and at least in the half of Falmouth that I represent, that's definitely a starter home is $300,000, which
that's a one bedroom with no basement.
Right.
And,
it's tough. It's tough. And putting down 20%, so $60,000, is hugely prohibitive for a lot of people because you just can't save up to get that 20% down. And so what this bill does, it allows first-time home buyers to have a tax-exempt savings account to encourage them to save money for their home, saves them thousands of dollars. And also, if you put down that 20%, you don't have to pay things like mortgage insurance, which is literally just someone handing over money to a bank and getting nothing back from it. I mean, that's what mortgage insurance is. And
it protects the bank.
It just protects the bank. You don't get anything from it. You're just paying the bank money and not getting anything back. And so that's a big problem. And so we need to save people money. And that's why having this first-time homebuyer savings account is a really nice piece of legislation. I filed it in the House. Senator Sear, the Cape and Islands senator, filed it in the Senate. And we were working with groups like the Realtors Association to move it forward. And I think, in our community, lack of affordable housing is driving not only young people, but working families and seniors out of the district. We need to do everything we can to sustain our community and make this a place where people who grew up here and love it here can afford to live.
So Dylan, speaking of cost prohibitive things, and probably a huge issue that's keeping young people and maybe not young people from owning a house and having those down payments is having to pay for health care.
Sure.
Which is hugely expensive, especially if you don't have that full-time employer that's going to help you a lot with that kind of thing. So you were talking a little bit about earlier before we started recording some conflicts that were going up in Boston with the governor and with healthcare. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, right now, kind of in our country, there's just a lot of uncertainty about our healthcare system. And we saw that play out just this past week with the Graham-Cassidy bill in D.C. There's a lot of uncertainty there. What we do know is if any of these Republican bills in D.C. had gone forward, Massachusetts would be out around $2 billion. Oof. We have a $40 billion budget. If we lose $2 billion of that a year, we will be in a huge budget crisis. And a lot of programs are going to need to be cut, and taxes will probably need to be raised to make up a staggering $2 billion deficit. And so while this is going on in D.C., and while a lot of the Republicans are trying to push a bill that would strip millions of people from their health care insurance in D.C., we actually had a smaller fight at the State House on this because Governor Baker put forward an initiative that would have stripped 140,000 people here in Massachusetts of their normal health care insurance. And it would have cost them money, it would have raised prices for their health care, and it would have given them less access to care. And so, I just don't think that is what Massachusetts is about. We're the first nation in the country to pass universal health care. I think we've established that everyone should have health care in our state, that it's a right. And so this is something that the Democratic legislature really came out against. And so, we a lot of times we work well with the governor, but this was an instance of where we had to override his efforts and we vetoed his proposal and shot it down on the floor. And I think it's really important that in Massachusetts, especially with what's going on nationally, we continue to reaffirm our belief in a universal healthcare system and coverage for all.
Well, we appreciate your efforts with that.
Yeah, I mean,
it's an uphill battle for sure.
If this had gone forward, we would have been the first state in the nation to roll back the Medicaid expansion, which I don't think I think that's unconscionable, especially at a time when in D.C. we see how on the national level the Republican Party is trying to strip millions of people from their health care insurance. And so, we do need to get at the cost of health care. That's around 40% of our budget, right? And so there's a lot of things we need to look at when it comes to costs, but we also need to make sure that everyone in our state has the health care that they need.
Absolutely. health is one of the basics of human functions,
Yeah.
and your economy suffers greatly if you do not have a healthy public. So
Yeah.
it's a good investment. Continuing on, talking about money, Millionaires Tax. You
Sure.
said you wanted to discuss that a little bit.
Yeah, well, speaking about, there's a lot of great programs in our state, and we need to think about, if we want to be a state that, funds the art, funds transportation, funds our education system, we need money to pay for it. And so one of the things that has moved forward, and one of my proudest votes in the legislature, was to pass and advance the Millionaires Tax, or the Fair Share Amendment. And what this is a 4% increase on income over $1 million. So if you make your first $1 million that you make a year is taxed at the same rate as everyone else. It's just if you make over that, when you make your next $1 million a year, you have a 4% increase in income tax. And this is, in Massachusetts, we're one of the few states in the nation that has a flat state income tax rate. And so that means that someone making $50,000 a year is paying the exact same income tax rate as someone making over $1 million a year. That to me is just not equitable at all. And the money raised from the Millionaires Tax will go directly towards education and infrastructure, two of the most important things that a government can fund. So, I think people making over $1 million a year can pitch in a little more to help out our education system and our infrastructure system. And this bill, this is not a bill actually. This amendment, it's a constitutional amendment. So it's going to be, which means it needs to be voted on by the legislature twice, and then it goes on the ballot. And so we voted on it, and now it'll go directly to the voters, and voters will see that in the 2018 election. So if you're at home watching, make sure you vote in support of the Fair Share Amendment, which taxes millionaires who make over $1 million a year to pay for our education and our infrastructure. Really important piece when it comes to addressing income inequality in our state.
Excellent. It's always good to know what's coming up on the next ballot, so people
Yeah.
can be educated
Quite
about
a bit
it
this year.
well in advance. Well, good. I appreciate that. So let's switch gears a little bit. We were
Sure.
talking more nationally and statewide. Let's talk some local stuff. You're telling me about some environmental policies and bike path funding on a local level.
Yeah. I mean, the Shining Sea Bike Path in Falmouth is one of the greatest resources in the entire state of Massachusetts, not just Falmouth. If you look at TripAdvisor, it's the #1 thing to do on Cape Cod TripAdvisor, not just Falmouth, but Cape Cod's TripAdvisor. And statewide, I think it's in the top 15 or so of things to do in our state.
Wow.
And so we know that this isn't that supporting bike routes and supporting our bike path isn't just about fun recreation, which it is, and it's terrific. And I'm a regular biker on the Shining Sea Bike Path, but it's also about an economic boost to our communities. Because it's such a tourist attraction, a lot of people come here, they rent bikes at Corner Cycle or elsewhere, and they go along the route and they stop and grab food and use our stores and use our restaurants. And so back in 2014, there was a bond bill that appropriated $900,000 for repairing the Shining Sea Bike Path. And so we want to shake free that money in the bond bill. And so one of the things that I did was spearheaded a letter to Administration and Finance to pitch them on releasing that funding. The entire Falmouth delegation signed on. I believe that the town selectmen also sent their letter of support in. And it's really important that we maintain the bike path and continue to fund it so we continue to get the benefits that it brings our town and frankly that it brings the state. And so we're gonna keep reaching out. We're gonna set up a meeting with the administration about this funding. But my hat's off to local officials and the rest of the delegation for joining in this effort.
Excellent. It's good work. I personally use the bike path several
Awesome.
times a week. I live right by it, and
Yeah.
that was an intentional thing. So we're going to kind of wrap up here. I know you've got a busy day ahead of you, and I promised to get you out of here on time. So
All good.
you want to mention just a couple of things that are on the horizon that we haven't talked about?
Sure. I mean, one of the big things coming up this fall is criminal justice reform. And that's something that I think people should weigh in on now if they want to have their voices heard on it. So reach out to my office if you have ideas on criminal justice reform. There are a few things that I'm focused on. One is looking at ending mandatory minimum sentences, especially for drug offenders. We have a court system for a reason. Judges listen to cases and will be able to issue the proper punishment. It's bizarre to me that we have an entire court system, but we allow for mandatory minimum sentences, which basically takes all control out of our court system's hands, even though they hear the case and they know about it. So that's a big piece, and mandatory minimum sentences is a large piece about why our prisons are really kind of overflowing. We're looking at raising the age of what is considered a juvenile. We know based on a whole lot of data that people's brains continue developing up until they're 25. And so, should we raise the juvenile age from 18 to 20 or 21? That's something that's being looked at. We're also looking at things like ending solitary confinement. I personally think solitary confinement is a form of torture. If I was put in solitary confinement for more than 2 days, I would probably go crazy. Some people in our state have been put in there for a year or more. It's crazy. And so we need to really address that. And another piece, there's a lot of pieces to this, and I encourage folks to reach out to me, but another piece is about treating substance misuse, addiction, and mental health issues not as criminal issues, but as diseases, and treating them in our mental health system and treating them in our substance misuse treatment system rather than our criminal justice system. I think that's another really important piece of broader criminal justice reform. So folks should reach out to my office about that. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, it's all good work, and of course, you're welcome back here anytime. Just
thank you,
contact
Jeff.
me, and thank you for stopping in and having a little chat and updating Falmouth.
Of course.
I know what you're doing for us up in Boston.
Of course. Anytime.
Absolutely. So stay tuned for the end credits. We will have contact information for Representative Fernandes' office, phone number, email address, all that stuff, so you can get a hold of him if you need to in his office, and everyone there that will help you out. This has been Jeff Wyman with Representative Dylan Fernandes at Falmouth Community Television. Thank you for watching.